honestly, is they have the woe is me mentality. It's too hard. Life isn't fair. These things in life are not easy for me. You look to your left and you look to your right and you start to judge yourself off other people. Like, if you're a female, well, she's skinny and she doesn't work out as hard as I do. And everything starts to corrupt your mind. You start to look around too much at other people and what they're doing, and that starts to corrupt your own dialogue. We are judging ourselves against too many fucking people. You have to judge yourself against yourself. And that's the one thing I started learning, man. This isn't a race against me and Rich Roll. This is a race against David Goggins and David Goggins alone. And once you can silence all that bullshit, all the outside interference and things that are attracting your mind to everything, you can then start to grow in realizing I'm stressed out for no reason. This is my own little race. This is my own timeline, and this is how I'm gonna run it. Why it was important for me to finally realize, stop being all these fake people I used to be, stop being afraid. There was no growth until I cut myself down to nothing, to the person I really was, the real human being. And once I found out who I really was, that's when I started growing. I was trying to build on top of a lied, fucked up foundation. You can't build a house on a fucked up foundation. So I had to get down to the actual mineral soil of who I was, and that's when you can start real growth. It starts to peel all those layers away. All those artificial layers away. If you're willing to suffer and go back in the grind, that internal dialogue you have with yourself when you're in misery and you're uncomfortable, it's a real, scary, unfiltered, no lying dialogue between you and yourself. And people know exactly what the fuck I'm talking about when you're in a bad spot in life and your mind is saying all kind of shit. That's who you really are. That's the real you. No Rocky Balboa moments going on up there. You're like, hey, you know, it's round 14. Let's come on, we got this. No, it's like, fuck this, I'm out of here, man. This is crazy. That's where the growth happens. When you're able to stay in that moment and talk yourself back into the suck of wherever you're going through, and you start stripping those layers away, but as you're stripping those layers away, you're building calluses over top of shit in your mind. That's where the growth starts to happen. Is when you have to force yourself to stay in it. You can't leave it. That first 100-mile race I've talked about several times, where I lost all. And it was like 3 days later, I'm in a 100-mile race, no training at all. And when you do that, it is stupid. But what it does, if you're not gonna quit it, like you just talked about, it breaks you down to nothing. You are suffering so badly, mentally and physically, that all of these demons are coming up, and you're trying to find answers, and you're trying to find answers. It was like living 19 hours. It's like 5 years I put into 19 hours of highs and lows and pitfalls and seeing the sun come up. And it was like, my God, I lived 5 years in 19 hours. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. No, because once you realize what you get from Ultra, what you get from life, I can apply that now just by sitting here with you. You know, those tools now, I don't need to go out, even though I still do it, and go out and hammer. The hammering part is like, you know, it's like a purging of the soul. And you go out there and hammer out there. Yeah. You gotta hammer, man. You gotta get after it. But now I figured out so many different ways and so many different tools through all of the journeys I've been through just growing up, man, just being mature, you know, just being really mature and not holding on to hate. You know, really just letting all that shit go, man, and starting from scratch, and let's go. I don't think enough about people that have wronged me, or situations that have wronged me, because once you've come to a place where you are really happy with who you are in life, no one fucks with you anymore. Even though they're fucking with you, it doesn't fuck with you. You know, like all these, I used to be so hurt by everything in the military, and if someone did something or said something, like, man, I have overcome so much shit. There's not, I'm just in a really good headspace right now. My headspace, I own it. A lot of people own other people's headspace. I own my own shit now. They're more caught up in what other people think about them than how you feel about your own personal self. So a lot of people have their brain and their mind on rent to a whole bunch of motherfuckers in the world. I am paying rent on my own shit. I finally put a down payment on it, and I'm making payments every daggone day on my own fucking brain.
Well, the first thing I think you need to understand is that these people that you're comparing yourself to, you don't really know very well. And what that means is that you see their shiny outside, but you don't see the reality of their life. Maybe you're in California, see someone speeding down the road in a convertible Porsche, and you think, oh man, what a lucky bastard. And even people who are comparatively fortunate have hard lives. And so the ideal that you're observing that makes you jealous and resentful is in large part an illusion that's created by your own mind. I can give you just one example. I know a fair number of extremely wealthy people, and most of the people I happen to know are people who've made their money themselves. And I tell you, man, they have a burden of responsibility that would crush me, would crush the typical person. They're just working flat out, like 90 hours a week, and they have thousands of people depending on them. And they have their money, and they have their status, and that's not nothing. But don't be thinking that there isn't a price to be paid for that. They don't see their families, they're often divorced, they don't see their children grow up, and they don't have time off. Now, there are wealthy, what would you call, playboy types, I suppose, who live out the dreams of wealth of a foolish 14-year-old, but they're not that common. And you have to be careful of what you're jealous of, because you don't really know what it is. And then the other thing that's kind of useful is to understand that you're different from everyone else. And this is especially true as you get older. When you're 17 or 16 or something like that, comparing yourself to other people makes a certain amount of sense, because 16 and 17-year-olds, they're kind of the same, which is why when you go off to university, you can make friends so quickly. It's like, I'm just about 60. It takes me like 15 years to make a friend now, as opposed to the 2 months that it took when I was 17. You're quite different from other people, and you shouldn't be comparing yourself to them, because they're not like you. They don't have your family. They don't have your temperament. They don't have your troubles. They don't have your abilities. The only person that has those is you. And this is why one of the rules, I think it's rule 4, is compare yourself to who you were yesterday and not to who someone else is today. And see, that's a game you can win, because you could be a little better today than you were yesterday. And that's a good thing. You're a little better. That's a good thing. And no doubt there are some things that you could improve. If you sit and meditate for any length of time about what you're not doing optimally, answers will spring to mind. You could be getting up earlier. You could be watching YouTube less. Comparing yourself to who you are now, that's a game you can win.
You need to have a hierarchy of improvement. You need to be aiming for something, and that means you're going to be lesser than people who've already attained along that dimension.
Yeah.
It can give rise to envy. So the question is, who should you defeat in the final analysis? And the answer is, you should defeat your former self. You should be constantly trying to do that. And you're the right control for yourself too, because you're the one who's had all your advantages and disadvantages. And so if you want to compete fairly with someone, then you should be competing with you. And it is the case, and this is what we were talking about too with regards to the self-improvement of the fighter, is, well, if you're improving yourself, then what you are doing is competing with your lesser self. And then you might also ask, well, what is that lesser self? And that lesser self would be resentful and bitter.
But you do need to improve, because there's more to you there's not as much of you as there should be. So what's the comparison? Well, that's easy. You just say, okay, well, here's my position in time and space right now. Here's my virtues and faults. It's like, I can be a little bit better tomorrow in some minor way. And so it's a perfect comparison, and then you get a trajectory going. It's like, well, obviously I'm not perfect, but I'm slightly less terrible than I was yesterday. Man, you keep that up for 5 years, and you're wherever you should be.